Welcome to EFT Nation, your home for all things tapping. For show notes and resources, please visit EFTtappingtraining.com. We are your tapping hosts. I'm Alina Frank.
And I'm Craig Wiener. The information provided in this podcast is not a substitute for counseling or medical advice. The information presented here is meant to inspire and educate listeners, but are not guarantees of any kind.
Today we're talking about cravings. And not just
timing.
for pregnancy.
Not just for pregnancy, especially, we're recording this holiday time.
Right.
Right, and that's often one of those times where food-related cravings becomes an issue for a lot of people.
For sure.
Yeah. And we're going to be talking about cravings for different things, and we're going to be talking about cravings because it often is at the forefront of other behaviors, compulsive behaviors, addictive behaviors, etc. It's one component of those.
Right, so a craving is part of the complex puzzle of addiction.
Yes, yeah, that's one part,
Right.
Sure. So what are these things, cravings? What is it? It's a desire, that can be a strong desire, that if unmet, if unfulfilled, can produce pretty powerful physical, emotional effects and suffering, right? So again, it's at the heart of compulsive behaviors, addictive behaviors. It could range from mild to quite intense. It can be thoughts that become feelings, that become physical sensations, and all mixed together, right? They often have to do with whether something's available or not, right? So when we're around, coming in contact with the things, if we're watching them on TV, they're around the house,
Right.
It could be involved with what we anticipate will be the effects if we partake
Right.
in it, right?
Like
Whether
drinking
peace
a
or
pizza
calm or
coffee. Like I want coffee because I think that it'll bring me a boost of energy that I need.
And there's the thoughts of it, and maybe there is actually the physical response as well that's become conditioned from use over time,
Sure.
right? So there's usually a part that's a conscious part about it.
Yep.
There's a physical sensations often associated with it, and then there's the actions that are taken around those, right? To either avoid or partake or whatever those are. And they can be pretty varied, right? I mean, when you think about, for example, cravings with food, I think some of the most common that we've seen are sugar, carbs, chocolate, caffeine,
Yeah.
right? And, foods, beverages, caffeine, carbonated beverages, alcohol,
Right.
And then certainly it can then partake into chemicals and drugs, whether it be opioids, cocaine, marijuana, or any number of substances
Right.
that we crave and may or may not have developed yet an addiction for, or may have.
Right.
And then there's behaviors.
Right.
Right? I mean, on the kind of addiction side, we look at things that have been officially sanctioned, and we could look at, sex addiction, gambling addiction, but we're starting to see pornography. Well, if we don't call them addiction, or at least cravings, internet.
Right, I was
And
going to say.
social media, it doesn't have to be
that's a big one
pornography.
for a lot of people these days. A lot of people, they say I have an addiction to my
Right.
phone or addiction to, but there's certainly there could be a really strong craving for it without necessarily being an addiction.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of put addictions to the side for a little bit and just really focus on cravings. And one of the really powerful things that we're saying is this subject has been studied, researched, more than almost any other subject in EFT. I mean, really at the top level.
Right.
And we have,
I think it's a history of it. Like there was, we all, those of us that trained with Gary Craig, the founder of EFT, we would see how easily he could convince somebody to try it by just doing this, silly little demo with Hershey's Kisses. And so, back in the day, that's, that would be part of my demo was like bringing a bag and sharing it with people that were, like curious about it, not sure. And then they experienced this amazing aha in a minute, a round or two of EFT. And they went from really craving it at a 10 to I could throw it away right now.
Yeah. It's very powerful. And what I was going to say is we have a lot of research behind it.
Right.
Dr. Peter Stapleton has done programs with not just weight management and obesity, but really around craving specifically.
Right.
We start to look at, it's been done one-on-one. It's been done in group. It's been done in person. It's been done online. It's been done equally effective in 4 weeks versus 8 weeks. So when we look at the research...
With functional MRI.
Yeah, I was just going to say, most of how people measure cravings is how much I crave something. What's
Right.
called the power of food.
Right.
It's like a way of analyzing how strong does that substance partaking in it have a power over me versus me over it.
Right.
And how much I want a substance, etc. But we've actually started to look at it. She started to look at physiological anatomic correlates, like looking at functional MRI and parts of the brain that are involved with the rewards pathway,
Right.
and seeing actual objective changes in the brain body, so to speak, about
Yeah.
decreased reduction in cravings.
Right.
And the ability to, she's a good friend and colleague, and we've talked about how even many of these people, when they check back a year later
Right.
after the research,
Right.
many of them have forgotten
What
what
they
the craving
craved.
was
I
that they
know.
involved, that when they went into the study was about,
Right,
which
right,
is
right,
so,
right.
that's transformative, right?
Right,
It's
yeah.
not just I'm trying to not partake anymore. It's like, I don't even remember what that was that I had a craving for.
Yeah, that's very exciting.
It
Yeah.
is. So, again, in just talking about the craving part, let's talk a little bit about how people would do that. How would you use that? If somebody,
Sure.
let's just use the holidays, for example,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
let's just,
yeah. So let's
desserts abound.
Right. And so part of working with cravings, yeah, there's this, kind of very easy, I'm going to just pull it out on tapping on I really want this. So it would say you pull out the offending or the triggering food substance, and you would look at it, and if it's food, you would smell it. If it was a cigarette, you'd take a dry drag and smell it. And how much is that desire 0 to 10 to really consume it?
So, like, the emotion is 0 to
really
10
want it.
on wanting.
I really
Wanting,
want this.
craving,
So
yeah.
even though I really want this chocolate
Fudge cake.
Chocolate fudge cake that my mom makes every year, and I'm sitting here looking at it, and I really want it. So, and then the reminder phrase would be, I really want it, I really want it, I really want it. You would try to get that down to a 0. And the rule with really great gold standard, evidence-based, research validated EFT is get specific. So you might think, and when you aren't getting results, the first question to ask yourself is, how can I make this more specific? So there are aspects to the craving. It could be that, so you could do a round like that, and it may shift it, may not, and if it might drop a little bit. But you might want to go then to the next level, which is, okay, what is it about that taste, that first bite, that first drag? What is it about it that I'm really craving, as a way to get more specific?
And it could be like a physical sensation. The coolness of the way it interacts in my mouth.
Right.
The way it melts on
in
my
mouth.
tongue.
The way my fingers feel when I'm holding that cigarette.
So the immediate sensations, just in the partaking,
Yes.
can be one important aspect.
Right. So
Right.
give me a setup statement for that.
Okay. All right. So even though I really want this piece of Mom's chocolate fudge cake, and I really want it because I love the way that it just melts between the tongue and the roof of my mouth.
Yes.
It just melts. It's chocolate that just
Right.
melts across my tongue. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really want that. I
Right.
still deeply and completely accept myself.
Right. So that is another level of it. And then you also want to ask yourself, what associations and connections do you have to that particular thing?
Okay. So when you're getting more specific, as we start to say, one thing might be what I anticipate is going to happen, but the one that you're talking about right now is the associations perhaps from the past.
Yes.
That I have, because Mom's made this every year. I mean, since I was a kid.
Right.
Like this is a tradition, this
Right.
cake. And it just makes me feel like connected, even though Mom's not, around anymore. And
So even though I really want this cake because it's going to connect me to Mom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Or even though if I think about, because I just love that feeling afterwards, after I've had the cake, and it's just like, okay, holidays here. There's just this sense of connection and feeling of,
Right. Yeah.
Like
Right.
there's this feeling of abundance
Right.
that I feel when I have that. That just makes
Sure.
me feel overflowing,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And so I can anticipate and tap on how I expect it's going to make me feel once I consume it. Or
Exactly.
for coffee, for
Right.
example, or something, it might be the energy that it gives me,
Yeah.
or I perceive it
I'm
gives
just
me.
remembering a client that I had where she said, "Okay, the cravings that I have are very expensive wine, very expensive cheese, very expensive chocolate." And so it's like, what might be the connection there to all three of those? And so it was a matter of abundance. So we had to uncover the issues around her abundance and feeling like I deserve it, right, in order to release the offending food.
Yeah, and it's interesting around food, I find. I did an interview years ago and just kind of voiced that part of me is like, nobody can tell me what to do with food,
Yes.
right? There's an element of
Yes.
control. It's like, you can't tell me what can do, and I can eat it if I want to because it's
Yeah.
my body and I can't. And this almost very young voice that
Right.
perhaps didn't have the opportunity for so many years to be
Right.
able to enact
Right.
what they wanted, and now I can.
Yeah.
Even if it's to the detriment of my health
Yes.
and well-being and self-image and
Yes.
anything else, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is not just random that you choose one thing versus another when it comes to food. For me, it's similar to the work that I used to do around fetishes with people, or compulsion, that they could only have sex with this particular item. That's not random. That's it. There's a meaning behind it. PETA had a great story when we were talking with her once about the roast chicken. Like, in her study, she had somebody bring a whole roast chicken every week as their offending food, and of course there was story behind it. So it might not be evident right away, but what's beautiful about EST is you work with what's present, and soon you'll dive into, and your brain will give you answers to those particular connections.
And it's also very interesting with substances, especially food. Now, food is so critical, right? It's wired into survival,
Right.
right? So, really important part of the brain that food connected with emotions and
Yep.
emotional eating have to do with story and survival in our life. I mean, it's very, very complex.
Yep.
Lost my thought there. But what I wanted to say is, as we start to look to food, we start to look to the power of food. It often, as you said, is not random because it has to do so much with our past. And so while we may begin with like a random craving on chocolate,
Right.
it often has very deep connections to
Right.
family, self-worth,
Right.
so many deeper issues. So,
Right.
while you may begin with this tapping on your own, you may end up tapping into deeper issues that you're going to want to take and work with a practitioner to go deeper and work more thoroughly with.
Sure, sure. And I also want to refer people back to the episode that we did on secondary gain, because anything that's been around in your life for longer than a few months, consider that there are some secondary gains for you holding on to it. So one of the things that you can do once you feel like, oh, I feel pretty good right now, I can just leave this piece of chocolate. I want you to actually go and imagine throwing it away. Imagine throwing away or putting those cigarettes in water. Imagine
That brings up that
Yes.
I can't do that.
right, taking your cell phone and putting it in a lockbox for a day. Like, just those feelings that come up, use those. Absolutely use those.
Yep.
And look for the trigger,
Yeah, the timing and triggers, that's
timing
really
and
important.
triggers,
When would you
yes.
tap? Like, when would you tap?
Well,
on
let's
this?
just say that you're going to your parents' house with family for the holidays. You know what the triggers are going to be that are going to set you off and what is going to stress you out. So before even dealing with the actual food item, why not list, oh, I just know my aunt's going to bring up blah, blah, blah. And my uncle's going to ask me why I'm not married yet. And my
Somebody else will
father's
bring up
going to ask me
politics.
politics. Yeah,
And then-
so write those down and tap on it so that you give yourself an opportunity to feel more regulated once you're there. And you might not even have to deal with the craving at all if you tap on what you perceive those triggers are going to be.
Yeah, because so often stressors
Yes.
are the triggers for us wanting some sense of relief.
Yeah.
And the one thing that our bodies know
Yes.
give us at least temporary relief
Yeah.
is partaking in the activity or substance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I love what you said is doing it in advance is much gentler and easier
For
and
sure.
more likely to be successful if I'm
For sure.
going to be interacting with a family member, et cetera, that I know is going to stress me out. I know is going to more likely trigger me wanting to eat chocolate or more whatever,
Exactly.
is to do it at home before I get there.
Yeah.
Then but could I,
Yeah.
at their house, step
Yes.
off into the bathroom and tap a little bit as well? Of course, it just, socially it could be harder.
Oh yeah. I mean I was watching here's my guilty pleasure, TikTok. There's just some amazing things like indigenous TikTok and just some great stuff. But there was Thanksgiving night. I went on there for a few minutes, and there was so many of these short videos of everyone in the family getting drunk. Like that's how they were dealing with the stressors.
Right.
And so we're suggesting tap on the stressors so that you don't have to go and, numb yourself out, which is what you're doing. There's that old book that was famous years ago. It's not what you're eating, it's what's eating you.
Right. And we'd be remiss because at the time of this recording, we're still amidst the pandemic,
Yes.
the COVID pandemic,
Right.
which for many people is not able to get together.
Right.
Right? Not creating social distance and not
So
getting together
that
with family.
sadness,
So
yeah.
the feelings that come with not being connected with
For
your dad, even though he
sure.
brings up politics or mom or whatever.
Right. The loneliness, the sadness,
Exactly.
the yearning, the nostalgia, right, that comes up around the holidays. Excellent things to work on.
Triggers that will also bring up often partaking in those things that
Yeah.
give you a sense of
Yeah.
temporary peace, ease, whatever.
Yeah.
Because you know what? It fills a need,
Absolutely.
an emotional need. Those cravings fill an emotional need, even albeit temporarily.
Right.
They still
Yeah.
provide that.
I was just being interviewed by Gene Montreselli, and he was saying that he enjoys giving an assignment to his clients of having a journal, and when they have like the emotional eating or they go for what they're trying to, let go of in terms of a craving, he has them write down who was I with, what was I doing, what room was I in, what was I thinking, who did I just talk to, what did I just think about.
Great.
So all
Detective
of those,
work.
absolutely, so that you find out what those triggers are.
Yep. Now, we said at the beginning that, I don't want to say it's a gateway, but cravings are often an important or integral aspect when we move into the world of addiction
Sure.
and compulsive behaviors.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
Now, this we want to be very clear that there are grades here that we're starting to move into being really careful and diligent. If you're
Well,
dealing
yeah, and it has to be within your scope of practice if you're
when
a
we're talking about
practitioner.
addiction,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, especially. So whether you're working with somebody that's trained in working with addictions, whether you're working with and that's a very specific skill set,
Right.
especially in licensed mental health care. Not everybody that's a licensed therapist has skills of working with addiction.
Right.
Or compulsions. So make sure that if this is something you're dealing with, if you're doing, if you're trying to get off opioids, if you're trying to get off painkillers, if you're trying to get off substances and alcohol, please reach out for excellent support. Working with cravings is often one of the things that will be part of that work, because if you can reduce the cravings,
Right.
you can start to break up the frequency
Yeah.
of what you're doing, right?
And isn't there like a really strong correlation in like as played out from like the ACEs study and things like that? There's a strong correlation between addiction and trauma or childhood trauma.
And especially childhood trauma.
For sure.
I think if you speak with anybody that deals with addiction, especially, and EFT, Worlds of Trauma, etc., will find, I don't want to say 100%, because I don't think anything's ever 100%, but the strongest of correlations between early childhood trauma and the more of those that one has when one starts to have 4 and
Sure.
5 and 6
Right.
adverse childhood experiences. The tendency or the correlate between that and addictive behavior skyrockets.
Right.
So often the undoing, to start to break down the recidivism, to start to break down the pattern. And, one of my favorite people in this field is the Dr. Gabor Mate, right? And he would say that addiction is not the problem.
Right.
The substance or whatever is not the problem. It's actually the answer.
It's a symptom.
For that person.
Yeah, I also see it as a symptom.
Sure, it's a symptom of the underlying problem. And it's the only way that person has found successfully and repeatedly to find some sense of relief from their suffering.
Right.
So while it's still having, effects on their health, on their family, on their finances, on their work, because really that's what addiction is. It is now defined as a chronic medical disease. It has complex interactions in brain circuits and genetics and the environment and somebody's life experiences, and especially traumatic life experiences. And it's taken to the extent that it has become physiological changes that you can see in their body and brain as a result of the partaking in the behavior.
Right. And
Right?
it is a psychological and physical inability to stop consuming or doing, right?
Yeah. So that's a process.
In spite of the harm that comes as a result of that. Like you
Right,
said.
because that becomes secondary.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking forward to a lot more research that needs to be done showing EFT's effectiveness of working with addiction. I have no doubt seen it, but anecdotally.
So cravings, we got a lot of research.
We got a lot of research with cravings.
Not so
No,
much.
not so much.
Not
Yeah,
so
so
much.
that really needs to be done a lot more, and I'm looking forward to and trying to support that happening in our field.
Sure. Okay.
Anyway, so that gives you a bit,
yeah.
A taste.
Lots of good food for thought.
Oh, did you really say that? Oh, all right. Thanks for joining us today. We hope that was helpful. Thanks for joining us today at EFT Nation. And remember that you can find show notes and previous episodes at EFTtappingtraining.com.